As South Africa heads into the new year, 2024, it is the year of a very, very important general election. The first election at which no party is guaranteed to get a majority. Now, the last time that happened was in the 1940s. South Africa has never had such a thing as a close election since then. We've been run effectively by a party that going into the election was assured of returning to power. The ANC is by no means assured of getting into power after the election later this year. We know that in the last local government election, they managed to get 46% of the national vote, which means they're going to have to govern the country completely differently. And this is creating a lot more interest in the world of politics, and it means that everybody's views are important. And with us today is one of the veterans of the South African political scene, and that is the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Peter Groenewald. Peter, welcome to the State of the Nation. We've had you before, but not live. It's great to have you here in studio.
Thank you, Mike, and it's always a privilege to be here.
Yeah, so let's kick off with some of the latest news, and we'll get into the election talk a little bit later. Recently, the South African government went to the International Criminal Court and laid the charge of genocide against Israel. Now, I see a lot of parties have commented, and a comment that's attributed, I know through Corne Mulder, not yourself, is that this is a publicity stunt. Do you believe it's a publicity stunt, or do you think the country, that the presidency was quite correct in going to the International Criminal Court?
Now, I also agree that it is a publicity stunt. And the reason we say that is that, I mean, if you look at the reactions from the ANC government when it came to the International Criminal Court, for instance, when al-Bashir was here in South Africa, at that stage they actually condemned the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and the reason they gave was actually that they are biased, they discriminate against African states. In fact, at that stage, they wanted to leave the Rome Statute and that we will not be part and have to comply to all those requirements for that. So at that stage, when they suited them, they didn't want to do anything with the International Criminal Court. Now suddenly, and it actually also happened when they had the BRICS conference in South Africa with Putin. It was quite, a tug of war, which side, and all the time they had criticism against the criminal court. So why suddenly now they actually praising the criminal court and say that they come forward with laying this charge against Israel? So as far as I'm concerned, it is nothing else but the publicity stunt from their side, and to distract the focus of South African citizens when it comes to more serious matters in South Africa itself. So I agree.
So if it's a publicity stunt, then the question is, who is this aimed at? Because you could look at it and let's say this is a publicity stunt because quite clearly their actions are not consistent. They would have had the same response because Vladimir Putin's been shelling civilian areas and hospitals, and we've had many reports now over 2 years of that. There's also been a genocide in Syria and Yemen, of which the ANC have been completely silent on. So quite clearly this is an issue that they feel they're going to get some support. The question is, do you think they're using this for publicity locally in South Africa? Do they see this as a vote catcher? Or are they singing for their supper internationally?
Now, I think it is actually to cater and to try and influence the voters in South Africa. Because we know in South Africa that when it comes to world politics, they made the wrong decision every time. As we've mentioned, if you look at Russia and the Ukraine situation, you've mentioned Syria. Even if you go and look at China, for instance, if you look at the abuses when it comes to human rights in those countries, they are on the wrong side. When it comes to, can I say, the international world, I think they will not be able to regain status and some goodwill any further, because the world already took note of their choices. And they are not, can I say, acceptable when it comes to double standards in a certain way. So for me, it is quite clear that they actually want to tell the voters in South Africa, but we are still a big role player when it comes to international issues. Because you must remember, there are quite a lot of concerns amongst the people of South Africa when it comes to business people, when it comes to ordinary citizens. What is going to happen in the future, specifically when it comes to the economy of South Africa? Because we must ensure that we get growth in our economy so that we can create jobs. And let's take AGOA, for instance, when it comes to the United States of America. They will make a decision, I think it will be likely, next year they have to make the final decision, 2025. Are they going to continue with it or not? That's going to have a huge influence. Say, for instance, they're going not to prolong it any further, then there's an economic price that is going to be paid by the people of South Africa. So I think they want to get some ease amongst the people of South Africa to say, listen, we're still a world player, so the economy is still open for foreign investment in South Africa, which I don't think, yes, we do have investment, but it's not going to enhance further foreign, can I say, investment in such a way that we're going to create a lot of new jobs in South Africa.
Dr. Groenewald, do you think that the ANC's actions, which have been radically anti-West and radically pro the position of Russia and China, happened at a similar time, started at a similar time that the ANC was struggling to pay its own bills? Suddenly they couldn't pay salaries. Suddenly that all disappeared. Right? We know that there was a bill of over 100 million rand outstanding that was suddenly settled. Can you think that? Do you think that there's any link that can be made between us mortgaging our reputation and the ANC's own, personal struggles?
As I said, I think it's a sort of a smokescreen they're using to get the attention from the citizens of South Africa away from their own problems, as you've mentioned. You've mentioned the fact that they couldn't pay their bills. And we're talking about the 2021 election, where they couldn't pay the services. But there are many other issues when it comes to the ANC. For instance, their double standards. For instance, if we see how they misuse their power in Parliament, we can go to the Pala situation with the President. It's all those internal activities that is actually putting focus on the ANC as a government. And the voters of South Africa, seeing that we're going to have an election probably in May, that they are worried. We can even go further. And I think the biggest influence is, for instance, load shedding, where people experience something different when it comes to the effective functioning of the ANC government. And that is why they're coming forward with these issues and I say they use it as a smokescreen and say, don't worry about that. We will sort that out. And we will get support from the international world to solve your problems. I always say, and I say to the voters, I know that the ANC goes around and they're telling people that if you vote for any other political party and they become the government in South Africa, you're going to lose your social grants. But
the president said that just the other day.
Exactly. Now, what is the real fact of the matter? I say to those voters, if you keep on voting for the ANC, they're going to make the country bankrupt. In fact, the Minister for Finance said already we are actually bankrupt, and there won't be any money to pay your social grant. So if you vote for the ANC to think you save your social grant, you're making a huge mistake.
Okay, so we've got a very vulnerable ANC, polling very low in the polls, with some history of doing poorly in the last local government elections, which in South Africa has almost been a proxy for general elections. They've generally followed the same trend. So, we understand that they're in trouble. All the polls put them in the 40% somewhere. Load shedding, crisis of confidence, etc. It should be easy pickings, one would imagine, for opposition parties to say, we can't continue, vote for us, right? So Freedom Front Plus was one of the big movers behind the multi-party charter. First, tell us all, we're now 6 months on from the multi-party charter talks, right? We know that everybody has said how well they went. Everybody signed, lots of smiles, lots of photos, and immediately went back to war in some of the local municipalities. What is the state of play of the multi-party charter?
Well, let me first say that when it comes to the multi-party charter, we must be very clear on one issue, and that is not only to get rid of the ANC. And I said it when we were there, that the main aim of the multi-party charter and the parties involved in that is actually to save South Africa. Because we say that and you've mentioned of the issues, if we look at, for instance, the economy, crime, corruption, all those matters, then we say that we must save South Africa from that. And to save South Africa, we will have to get rid of the ANC government, because they have proved to the people over a period of 30 years, they actually destroyed the country. So the main issue here is to save South Africa, to create a better life for all people in South Africa. Now, people must understand the multi-party charter. It's not a coalition. A coalition is only formed after an election. But we have a unique situation in South Africa in this sense that because of our proportional electoral system, it is not like, for instance, if you have a constituency majority, or can I say the winner takes it all, electoral system. In a proportional electoral system, every vote counts for the result of who goes to Parliament, and each and every political party has its own supporters. And I always say that these partners must go out and they must ensure that they can get the maximum of their supporters to vote for them. Because, and if I can explain the electoral system in simple terms, firstly, what is an electoral system? The electoral system is actually the formula who actually convert votes in an election, say 10 million people have voted, into seats in Parliament, a National Assembly of 400 people. And I always use the simple example to say the proportional system determines. If you get 10% of the votes, you get 10% of the 400 seats, that is actually 40 seats. Now, to explain it, say 10 people voted in South Africa. 6 people voted for the ANC, 1 for Party A, 1 for B, 1 for C, and 1 for D. All opposition parties, but your vote counts, because then the electoral system comes forward and it said, ANC, you've got 6 out of 10. That's 60%. So you're getting 60% of the 400 seats, and that is 240 seats. Party A, B, C, and D are all opposition parties. 1 out of 10, it's 10%. You each get 10%, it's 40 seats each. But now, if people do not vote, what happens now? Now the ANC doesn't get 6 out of 10, but 6 out of 9. And 6 out of 9 is 66%. And I always say, are you part of the 6 out of 10 solution or the 6 out of 9 crisis? Because with not voting, you're making the ANC government stronger. And that's why I say, we as opposition parties must do everything to get your voters to vote for you, because you will get voters who will never vote for any other party, doesn't matter what. So get those votes, because you've mentioned, for instance, the last election, 2021. ANC in general, 46%. But we must also say, if you go and look at those results and the percentage of eligible voters in South Africa, they only received 12% of eligible voters. If you take, for instance, the last 2019 election, at the moment, the ANC's got 58% majority in the National Assembly. But they only received in 2019 27% of eligible voters. Therefore, I say, and I mean, they're quick to say, but we are representing the majority of people. No, you're only representing 27% of eligible voters. And that's why my view is that, and I said it to the partners, go out and get the votes. You maintain your own identity, your own policies, and only after the election you will go into a formal coalition agreement. And of course, then it's negotiation to see what policies are acceptable, which are not acceptable, will you find each other? And I also foresee that you will get political parties who are not part of the multi-party charter at the moment, who will join in such a coalition government. But what we did with this multi-party charter is to say to the people, because people say, the voters say, but you as opposition parties, you must start working together with each other. And that's exactly what we did. We said to the people of South Africa, to the voters, we as different political parties are willing to take hands to work together, and we commit before the voters that if we become a coalition government after the election, these are our 6, for instance, principles, and these are our priorities. And that is what it is, to say to the people, we declare we will work together. But still, go and find each political party, the majority of your voters, to vote, because that is part of the process and the strategy to ensure that the ANC gets less than 50%. Then we say and ask people, come forward, register, ensure you can vote in the coming election. Because it is possible then to save South Africa and to create a better future for all in South Africa. And that is the whole essence of the multi-party charter. People ask me, but who's going to be the presidential candidate? There's not going to be a presidential candidate or a poster of whoever he or she may be. That will be determined after the election. And I think our voters must just understand the functioning of that. And that is because of the proportional system. You can get the maximum votes. Say, for instance, we had a constituency electoral system. Winner takes it all. Then it was a different story. Because when you have a constituency electoral system, only one candidate can win. And even if that candidate wins only with, say, one single vote, all the other votes are actually discarded. But only the one vote actually ensured that that specific person gets elected. And in such a case, sometimes you get worldwide a situation where I can say a coalition agreement before an election takes place to say, we will not contest that constituency because you have the best chance to get a candidate winning that constituency. So it's complicated. Yeah. I was in Germany about October last year to learn from their coalitions. And can I say, throughout, and I mean, I see them as the champions when it comes to coalition government. And throughout that whole study tour, it was quite clear that the Germans see if there are 3 parties part of a coalition, it's very complicated. Yeah. And I said to them, well, we have to deal with 9 to 10. So maybe after the election, you can send your people to come and learn from South Africa how to deal with coalition government.
Yeah. So I think you've sketched it out. So people should calm down. The multi-party charter is an agreement in place, but the real action happens the day after the votes are in. Then the real negotiation kicks in, the real agreement.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
And the reason, therefore, is also, at the moment the Constitution determines that 14 days after the official results had been announced, you must form a government, you must elect a president. Now, there's no way that we will be able to find each other in 14 days. That's why we came together before the time. And at this moment, behind the scenes, there are meetings, there are committees to look at, for instance, the different political parties when it comes to their policies and their manifestos. Where are there agreement on certain issues? Where are there differences? We're not going to discuss it now in the open. But when we get to the election, in that period of 14 days, then can I say the groundwork has been done, and you can say, listen, you will have to find each other on the next issues. And it makes it much easier. That's why we are busy with that.
Okay, so everyone looks at that, and that's great, and the talk's ongoing, and everybody is hopefully on a similar page. Are we being a little bit ahead of ourselves to expect better cooperation now, especially at local government election? And I'm looking specifically at what's happened here in Gauteng, where we understand it's been a difficult situation, but it seems like at every opportunity, some of the people who are sitting and part of your charter couldn't wait to get stuck into one another.
Yeah. I always said that we must remember that the proportional electoral system, one of the strongest features of such an electoral system is actually a coalition government. That's a feature of the electoral system. And we said from the start, so actually from the 90s, the Freedom Front Plus said, in the end, we're going to have a situation where coalition government will take place in South Africa. But I also said that it's a learning curve, not only for political parties, but it's also a learning curve for the electorate of South Africa. People ask, but if you're part of that coalition, why must I vote for you?
Yeah.
Then I can vote for anyone. We must understand coalition and emphasizing it's a learning curve. Now, when it comes to the political party, reference to, for instance, local government and what's happening there and national level, I do believe that the prospects on national level and even provincial level will be much better, because on local government level, it's a learning curve. We're learning from all those mistakes, and we must accept because of a new thing, and I always say that coalition governments ensure actually stronger political party leaders. And the reason I say that, I mean, it's part of the leadership of any political party. I mean, I'm a leader of the Freedom Front Plus. Of course, my first priority is the Freedom Front Plus. And I must do everything to enhance the policies of the Freedom Front Plus. But when we get to a situation to save South Africa, I say that you must be realistic, you must be rational in your approach, and then you must start focusing, but what is in the best interest of South Africa? Not only what is in the best interest of your political party, what is in the best interest of South Africa? Of course, you keep your principles. Freedom Front Plus got certain principles, we will keep to that. But when you move and shift your focus to issues that's really in the best interest of South Africa, and don't want to make propaganda of for your party from each or any other sort of matter, then we're going forward.
Now, you mentioned Freedom Front Plus, and if we can shift our focus towards the Freedom Front Plus, let's start off with your principles. Let's explain to people exactly what they're getting with the Freedom Front Plus.
Well, firstly, we say that we believe in self-determination, and I know people don't always understand what is self-determination, but we say that means that there should be a devolution of power to the people. At this moment, we have a centralizing situation where the central government wants all the power and they want to tell people what to do. Let me give an example. Our policy, our principles in our constitution, if you go and look at our manifestos, we say, for instance, if you can use local government. After 1994, the government has actually centralized different municipalities into one metro or a municipality. The Freedom Front Plus opposed that from the start, because we say you must have devolution of powers. You must try to get the smallest area for a municipality where people can actually have those councillors for their area responsible. And where I live, for instance, I was in 1988, I was the mayor of Stilfontein. It lies in the Kosh area, the Klerksdorp, Orkney, Stilfontein, Hartbeesfontein area. Each one had its own municipality. The service delivery, not talking about 1988, but the people could go to the offices if they had a problem with services when it comes to their bills or whatever the case may be. Now the government has centralized it in one Matlusana municipality. Now people have to go from Stilfontein, it's about 10 kilometers, to the offices in Klerksdorp. From Orkney it's even further, and from Hartbeesfontein it's actually about 50 kilometers. But then you get there and you don't get satisfaction with your services, or you have to wait because the system is down or whatever the case is, then you must go back and you must come again. That is actually not enhancing service delivery. And I use that as an example to say, what does it mean, self-determination? Because that's a specific form of self-determination when it comes to the devolution of power. And that's what we believe. And then we also say that we believe in the protecting and the protection of minorities in South Africa. I always use the example of Professor Samuel Huntington. He's a well-known international political scientist, he was. And he said that in modern democracies, the minority will have to be protected against the tyranny of the majority. And I say, if you want a good example of that, that is what we're having in South Africa at the moment. There must be a political party who actually is in Parliament, it's a voice in Parliament to protect minorities against the tyranny of the majority. And that is basic when it comes to the policy, and of course around that you have different issues and so on. And our first principle, we say that we're a Christian party, we believe in the Holy Trinity, and that's a basis. And that is what we are.
Now, you mentioned minorities, and South Africa, the minorities are getting smaller and smaller, right? And you need to grow. You're a political party, that's what you're in business to do, right? You know, you're not going to move the needle much by not growing, right? Let's be frank. One would imagine that you must sit there and wonder how to grow your party. Well, what is your strategy to grow your party? You know, because obviously you're going to have to appeal, either create other minorities out of the majority, try and carve them up and add other groups there, or do something that's more appealing. Because, you know, with the best respects, you've been known as a conservative Afrikaner, white. These were all tags that have been put to the Freedom Front Plus. And that's not necessarily the growing demographic, right? Now, you know, if you know, the other thing about Freedom Front Plus, I have many people sitting in that very chair that say the Freedom Front Plus are always solid and, you know, good people to serve on council with and so on and so forth. But no good if you're going to have diminishing following. Where does your growth come from?
Okay. Firstly, you're quite right. And I just want to say that we have to position ourselves on a political spectrum. I say that we are center conservative.
Right.
Now, you must also remember, if you look at the different minorities in South Africa, in the end, they are actually the majority. Because minorities is not only on, say, whites.
Not only on
that,
color,
yes,
they're on many.
No, correct.
Yeah.
The Zulus are a group on their own. The Xhosas.
Okay.
Now, what is interesting, quite a lot of those people, I receive calls to say, we agree with you. Specifically, if you go, for instance, to KwaZulu-Natal, when it comes to the land issue, they strongly agree with the Freedom Front Plus, because they also want their land to be protected.
Yes.
Therefore, if you're talking about growth, more and more, let me say, groups are actually realizing they also want more powers. I spoke about the devolution of power. They want that. I use an example to say at this moment, I see the Freedom Front Plus as the most or the party who has the most influence in South Africa when it comes to politics and other opposition parties. And the reason I say that, let's take black economic empowerment, affirmative action. All these years, the DA as official opposition enhanced it. In fact, in 2013, they agreed with the ANC to make the quotas higher when it comes to black economic empowerment. In 2019, when people realize they can vote for the Freedom Front Plus, they will not waste their vote. The vote will count. Now suddenly, the DA tries to become the champions when it comes to the abolishing of black economic empowerment and affirmative action and all those sort of things. So because of the fact that we say that we have these principles, the protection of minorities, because when it comes about certain issues, when it comes to minority groups, it is black economic empowerment and it is affirmative action. Now, suddenly they're also on board now. They also want the devolution. So more and more people start voting for those principles. But I am a straightforward politician. The Freedom Front Plus knows that we will not become a government on our own. But what we ask the people is, if you believe in these principles, what we say, make us stronger, that we have a stronger voice in Parliament. And that is where we start gaining votes at this moment. You will be surprised, I've got a couple of calls from Soweto. They want me to start a branch in Soweto for the Freedom Front Plus because they agree. And it's quite surprising. When I stop at a petrol station or something, I said, Dr. Groenewald, we agree. Black economic empowerment did not benefit us. I also say black economic empowerment is actually standing for black elite enrichment. And those are the issues that people and makes people to start and to vote for the Freedom Front Plus.
Yeah, okay, I agree, and I absolutely can't agree enough with you, just that South Africa is a very conservative place, right? And many of your policies would have resonance, but we still have the issue in South Africa where people are not, they may agree with Dr. Groenewald, but they're not going to vote for Dr. Groenewald. They don't see themselves represented there, right? And you know, we've had that discussion with many parties before. How are you going to break that wall? Are you going to? I mean, when you say you're getting requests for branches in Soweto and places like that, one would imagine branches in places like KZN make all the sense in the world. But who is representing the Freedom Front Plus in those branches?
Well, firstly, I also want to say that you ask me what is going to break the wall. The wall is already start breaking. Because firstly, in the Western Cape, our representative in the Western Cape legislature is a brown person. We have a black councillor in Bella Bella, for instance. But the Freedom Front Plus believes in merit. We say, if you want a position, it's about merit. There's a process. Let's take, for instance, the candidates now for the lists for the coming election. People have to write an exam. They have to deliver a speech where they are giving certain marks for that. It's a process.
Yes.
And everyone goes through that. And we say, because of that merit, people are coming through. Previously, I want to say that there was this perception, granted, that firstly, the Freedom Front Plus is a racist party.
Yeah.
It's only for white people. It's only for the Afrikaner. We do not apologize for the fact that we say that, of course, we believe in the protection specifically when it comes to the Afrikaner. But we've changed our constitution in 2012 to add other minority groups specifically.
Yes.
To say it's not just the protection of Afrikaners, yes, of course, and I do not apologize for that, but also for other minority groups. And I think one of the main issues why people previously didn't really wanted to vote for the Freedom Front Plus is because of the campaign, specifically from the Democratic Alliance, who said, don't waste your vote on a small party like the Freedom Front Plus, mentioning by name. And people believed that because they didn't understand the electoral system, which I explained. But now people start realizing my vote counts. I can vote for any opposition party or any party as long as you go and vote. And therefore I appeal to people. And they are sometimes surprised. I say, of course I want you to vote for the Freedom Front Plus. But if you don't want to vote for the Freedom Front Plus, please just make sure you go and vote for any other opposition party. Because that is the way we can get the ANC out of government and coming back to the short phrase to say, save South Africa. And I am experiencing that at this moment, where I'm already busy with my election campaign.
Okay, so you're going to have to submit a list, right? Because we do work on a proportional system.
That's
Everybody
right.
submits lists. Does your list have to be 400 long or not necessarily?
No, it can only be 200.
200.
Yeah.
So you by now, I'd imagine, sitting there every night busily putting together a spreadsheet of your list, right? Let's just say. What does the list look like? You know, in terms of demographics. And I don't want to go mad on demographics, but I'm saying it matters because, people want to see themselves represented. In terms of those demographics, what does it look like for the Freedom Front Plus?
Yeah.
Of those 200, how many of those names are white?
Yeah. Well, firstly, we're only starting the process
Right.
now, so in the end we will be able to answer that.
Well, the nice part is you can tell me anything you like. I'm going to have to take your word for it, but you're not that kind of
But
guy.
I mean, it's logic.
Yes.
I do believe
Yes.
the far majority will be white.
Yeah.
But I can also assure you that there are going to be black, brown, or Indian, or whatever from the other groups on that list. How many of them, that we don't know. But that's why we keep to the principle of merit. But, I mean, you can take, for instance, the ANC. If you go and look at their list, how many are white on that? I mean, we have that situation in South Africa that people are still voting about, or along, can I say, racial lines in a certain sense. But when it comes to, let's talk about the Freedom Front Plus list, as you said, we will have to see to that. But I do not believe in quotas. I do not believe that just because we must ensure and try to get more votes, we must deviate from our principles. It's a merit system, and it's like women. At this moment, we have 2 young women in Parliament. They didn't get those positions on the list because of the fact that they are women. They got there because they went through the system, and those were the positions they actually achieved after the whole process. And therefore, they are very proud. I am a member of Parliament in this position because I'm worth it, I worked for it. I'm not here as a token just to have a face for a woman. It's the same with the other races in our system.
Yeah. So last election you polled how many percent?
We polled about it was 2.7%. It was a growth of 250%.
Yes. And gave the Democratic Alliance heart palpitations, didn't it?
Say again?
You said the Democratic Alliance nearly had a heart attack because
of course. Yeah, there's a nice cartoon on the matter as well. But we didn't only receive the votes from the DA. Yes, I think the majority is very difficult to determine. Well, I suppose scientifically you can go and determine it. But what also happened in 2019, yes, we got some voters from the Democratic Alliance, and we knew that that is going to happen because many voters before said, listen, I believe and I agree and I support your principles and your views, but we must now first vote for the official opposition to try to get the ANC out. So they agreed with our principles, but they strategically voted for the DA. And that's why they've used the slogan of don't waste your vote. Now the people realized it was actually a lie. It was misinformation. I can vote for the party I believe in its principles or its policies, and my vote will still count. And quite a lot of people who previously didn't vote, voted in the last election. It was part of my campaign as leader to visit the specific, communities and groups and organizations, and to explain to them how your vote counts. And I've used the 6 out of 10 or the 6 out of 9 principle. And then many of them said, well, firstly, now for the first time we understand the electoral system in South Africa. We're going to vote. And that also was part of the votes we gained and got in 2019. We're going further with that, and I'm sure that we're going to get quite a lot of more votes than in 2019.
Are you in the prediction business?
Predictions in politics is a dangerous game, but what I say to people is that the ideal will be if we can get 25 members in Parliament. If we can get that, we have 12 at the moment, 10 in the National Assembly, 2 in the National Council of Provinces. That will be a wonderful progress. And that will make us also a stronger partner when it comes to coalitions. And I always say that to people, the stronger you make a specific political party, if you make the Freedom Front Plus stronger, then I have a stronger, argument in a coalition government to say, well, we have these couple of seats, and these are our principles. How can we find each other? For instance, we believe in a smaller cabinet. We talk about 18 ministers, maximum. Other political parties agree, but they don't agree with 18. They say about 24 or 25. But if the Freedom Front Plus, for instance, if we get 25 seats in the House, then I can say, well, I think 18 will do.
Now, you're a veteran of the parliamentary system in South Africa, and just recently the Secretary General, who's not elected by the people, elected by the ANC party themselves, said what nobody else would say within the party, and that they've been, we've all known it, but misleading Parliament. Basically lying, getting there, calling, used the example of calling a swimming pool a fire pool in the defense of Jacob Zuma. Now, we know that's, of all the things they've ever done, probably the least controversial. Everybody just rolled their eyes and laughed, I suppose, that they were, nobody really thought that the swimming pool had suddenly become a fire pool. But what is the repercussions of this sudden bout of either honesty, stupidity, who knows what it is, but it's clearly something that the ANC have never done. They've never in the past admitted wrong. They've never in the past admitted guilt. Suddenly you've got somebody influential in the party telling a truth, not all the truth. What's your reading of this situation, and how would it affect Parliament and what goes on in the election?
Well, firstly, you used 2 words, stupidity and honesty. I think for the first time in a very long time, the Secretary General was actually honest.
Honest, yeah.
The ANC, of course, see it as stupidity. And I think he's in big trouble when it comes to that. But that actually confirms what opposition parties is actually throughout, say, all the years, have accused the ANC government of, to say, but you are not accountable to the people, you are not transparent when it comes to the voters. If I say accountable, the Constitution is quite clear. The executive, meaning the President and the Cabinet, they are accountable towards the National Assembly. But the moment the opposition party comes forward with a specific issue, let's take, we refer now to the Nkandla issue, but about the Pala issue at Ramaphosa. The moment you come forward with a thing like that, then they do not hold the executive accountable. Then they vote only in the best interest of the political party. And that's a problem. of democracy at the moment. And that is why we are in South Africa where we are. You don't have a responsible government that acts in the best interest of the people of South Africa. They act in the best interest of their political party, namely the ANC. Now, what is going to happen now? As far as the Freedom Front Plus is concerned, we must now go back to see which members of parliament who actually made these allegations and who was actually in a position to make it. Unfortunately, Nhleko was a minister at that stage, is not in parliament anymore. If he was, we would have laid a complaint with the ethics committee. But we will have to go and see who of those people are still there and in what context that they use the same argument. And if it comes forward that they should have known that it was actually a lie, the swimming pool becoming a fire pool, then we will ask the ethics committee to look into those matters. So that is what we're going to do. But from the political perspective, of course, I'm going to debate in the State of the Nation address. I will tell the president in his face. So this is proof that the ANC actually lied to the people of South Africa. And if you lied once to save a president and protect the president, how many more times will the ANC be willing to lie to the people of South Africa? And of course, they will have a hard time in Parliament to explain this. And that's why I think the Secretary General is in big, deep troubled waters.
Dr. Peter Groenewald, thank you so much for coming in and answering the questions, representing yourself as you always do and your party. To everybody that's watching this, Freedom Front Plus is definitely an option. You've heard what the values are. If they appeal to you, it's definitely better than not voting. It's a very important election. We wish the Freedom Front Plus the best, a good voice, and one that many people that watch this it may appeal to them. So to everybody that's joined us today, on behalf of them, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Groenewald, for coming in. And to everybody that watched this, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, from my side. I appreciate, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Right, and let's not forget that if you watch this, State of the Nation is featuring many discussions with the leaders leading into the election. Hopefully you'll be able to be more informed by the time we get to polling day. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you the next time on the State of the Nation. Thank you very much.